What's up, guys? It's Hot Wheels Tournaments. Thank you for tuning in to the video today. Today, we are going to be predicting the 2025 Matchbox new models. As many of you know, I'm a huge Matchbox fan. I go to the Matchbox Gathering every year where they reveal the new models for the upcoming year. For the past 4 or 5 years, I've been taking pictures of all those models and reviewing them and giving my thoughts kind of on the next year's lineup. Well, last year I started a new trend where I predict the models with the help of some friends that go to the gathering every year. You may know them on Instagram as NMS Collection, Ezra B Man 1, Cars on Paper, and John Racer 3. We all throw out predictions, and then I compile all those predictions into one video, and then we review and see if we were right. So looking back at last year, the first year we did it, we went 2 for 11. The 2 castings we got right. We got the Subaru BRZ and the new generation Toyota Prius right. Going back and looking at that video, I still think there are a couple that are likely to come true. The Acura Integra and Cadillac Celestiq. Usually the diecast manufacturers are about 2 years behind when new stuff is coming out, because right now Matchbox is doing stuff for 2026. They'll be designing the 2026 new models. 2025 is already solidified. So stuff that kind of comes out in 2024, you'll end up seeing in 2026. But without further ado, this year we have 12 new models predictions. So let's go ahead and take a look. Starting us off for our first prediction, we are going to be talking about the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale. Mattel and Matchbox in particular have a great relationship with Alfa Romeo. I believe currently Matchbox has made every car in the Alfa Romeo lineup. We got the Giulia a few years back. They make 2 SUVs currently. Matchbox made both of those last year. They were new models. We've already seen the Stelvio and moving parts, and we're getting another one in the main line later this year at some point. And at the end of last year, Alfa Romeo unveiled their newest hyper or supercar, but their Halo car, their upcoming Halo car, which is the 33 Stradale. Given the relationship they have with Mattel, you have to think this is a lock to be made by one of the Mattel brands. Personally, I think it'll be Matchbox, just due to the fact that I think they have probably a little bit of a closer relationship and more of a working history dating back to the early 2000s. But I think this one is very, very likely. From the Alfa Romeo, we move to something on the complete other side of the vehicle spectrum with the SUV Toyota Land Cruiser, which is making its long-awaited return to the North American continent. Of course, the baby brother of this car, the Toyota 4Runner, is immensely popular in the United States. You can't drive half a mile down the road anywhere in the country without seeing one nowadays. That popularity carried over into diecast. Hot Wheels has an incredibly popular premium version. Matchbox has a very popular mainline version. In particular, the blue one they released, I think about a year and a half ago now, was impossible to find. People were just grabbing off the pegs left and right. And I would guess, just as Toyota has been keen to capitalize on the 4Runner's popularity with bringing the Land Cruiser back to the United States, Matchbox is going to be keen to capitalize on the Land Cruiser's popularity and bring it to the main line or moving parts line or premium line. These predictions can work for any of the three, and get collectors running to the pegs for a new Land Cruiser as well. Keeping with Toyota, let's talk about the Toyota AE86, because I think we are very likely to see one from Matchbox this year. Of course, we got its twin in the Subaru BRZ last year. They're basically the exact same car outside of the badging, and I believe the way the engine gets mounted within the car. They're basically the exact same car. They have the same specs. It's literally just the badging that would be different. But in the over decade-long run now this car has been produced, neither of the Mattel brands have ever given us a stock version in the Toyota badging of this car. And I think we are very likely to see one. Hot Wheels is probably not going to be doing it. They just released a version of this car, but it's like a souped-up race car version. If we're going to do stock, that's the name of the game for Matchbox. And if they're going to do a Toyota AE86, I think this year's the year. We had the BRZ last year. They did its older brother, the better sports car they make, the Toyota Supra last year. The Toyota license seems to be strong right now. I would love to see this one come to the main line in 2025. Speaking of Subaru, I think we're going to see a Subaru WRX this year. This video, we've been talking a lot about strong relationships with Matchbox and manufacturers. I think probably the strongest relationships Matchbox has right now, it's probably between either Subaru or Volvo. But for the last 4 or 5 years, it seems like we've been guaranteed to see a new Subaru. They did a lot of classic stuff in the beginning, and they've shifted more towards the modern cars that are in their lineup right now. In particular, a couple years ago, we got a fantastic version of the Forester that has since seen 3 or 4 really fantastic colors. Last year, as we mentioned, we got the BRZ, and the next car that seems very likely is the WRX. I know a lot of people don't like the look of the current generation WRX. It's too toned down, it's too everyday, which I would tend to agree with. But if there's an area Matchbox specializes in, it is everyday cars, and doing something like the Subaru WRX where it might look like a everyday car, but we know it is a WRX. It is a fantastic car. That would be really fun and a great addition to their lineup. I could also see him going and making the Crosstrek. I lean away from that though, just because Matchbox has made so many of those crossovers and mid-size SUVs and even full-size SUVs the last couple of years for that matter. I think they'd probably go for something a little bit more unique and a little bit more exciting if they were going to do a Subaru from the current lineup. From there, we go to like the top of the vehicle spectrum, the Koenigsegg CC850. I said they're good for 1 or 2 hypercars every year, so I'm going to be predicting 2 hypercars. I think the Koenigsegg CC850 is very likely. We have seen the Koenigsegg relationship before. They did the Hemera, I think about 2 years ago now. This is the latest project from Koenigsegg. It has been announced for a while. It's bonkers. It's got like an automatic and manual transmission like in one car, which just that's insanely cool engineering wise, which makes it an insanely cool car just in general. And therefore, it's going to come to the Hot Wheels or Matchbox lineup at one point. I like the Matchbox Hemera more than the Hot Wheels one. And for that reason, I want to see another Koenigsegg in the Matchbox lineup. I think they nailed the first one. And I think seeing this silver version sporting some Matchbox wheels would be absolutely fantastic. From there, we move into my first way out of left field pick. Matchbox does 3 or 4 just kind of like, whoa, like cars you would never see coming every single year. One of those always seems to be a JDM casting. In particular, the Mazda AutoZam from 2 years ago comes to mind. So I'm going to try and nail one of them. Am I going to get it? Probably not. But the Mitsubishi Galant AMG certainly seems to fit that mold. The Galant was kind of like the sleepy little sedan. I believe it was like the precursor. I want to say this. I'm not sure on this. So I'm going to take this. I believe it was like kind of like the precursor before they went into the Evolution, like before they got into like the Lancer and all that. So that's what this car was. But then like in the early 90s, before AMG was attached to Mercedes, they got their hands on this Mitsubishi Galant and they made 500 of them exclusively in Japan. And it's just like wild. There's just these Mitsubishis running around out there with AMG badging that are souped up and super fast, and that's super dope. I don't know how licensing would work. I don't know if they'd be allowed to use AMG badging on a non-Mercedes cars because AMG is now exclusive to Mercedes at this point. So that might be really complicated. So maybe you just get like a Mitsubishi Galant and not the AMG version because of licensing issues. But I think this would be really fun. I think this would be really cool. Every now and then I learn about like super obscure or like cool cars that I think are awesome, and I throw them just into a notes app on my phone to like keep in mind when I make videos like this. And when I was scrolling through it, I was like, this is the one. If they're going to make an obscure JDM car, this would be like the sickest one they could make. So the Mitsubishi Galant AMG badging, it'd be dope. From there, we move into a classic car. Matchbox makes probably 4 to 5 classic cars every single year, ranging from the 30s all the way through the 80s. We always see some cool stuff. So I was just going through the catalog trying to see what Matchbox hadn't made, and one that they have not made is the Plymouth Belvedere, which sported both a classic coupe look and a wagon look. I think a wagon Plymouth Belvedere would be really cool. I think it would be something Matchbox would also highly consider. Abe Lugo, the head designer there, loves to make classic cars. That's always what he's loved when it comes to car culture. It's always been what he's into, and he's into stuff even older than this. He loves like 30s, 40s, 50s stuff. But this seems very likely. Matchbox loves to do wagons. They have so many wagons in their lineup, especially ones that Abe has designed. So I think the Belvedere is certainly something that's on the radar and a possibility to see this year. There, we're going to move into electric. We're going to talk about the Hyundai Ioniq 5. This one comes from my friends they, especially, I believe that's Nick every year is always mentioning the Kia and Hyundais and how much he wants to see them. I believe, well, both Nicks are both big Kia fans. And these are cars we absolutely would have seen in the lineup by now, but for whatever reason, Kia and Hyundai get really weird about their licensing. Hopefully they can loosen up because these would be fantastic in the lineup. Matchbox is great at encompassing everything you see on the road today, and Kia and Hyundai electric cars are everywhere. You see them everywhere you go, and it's hard to do that into full encompassment when you're missing such a major player in the EV world today. But for the Knicks' sake, I hope we get to see him in the lineup soon. Sticking with the EV theme, the Dodge Charger Daytona, of course, very controversially, the Dodge Charger and the Dodge Challenger have moved from all gas to all electric, which, in my opinion, I think a lot of other people's, kind of ruins the feel and just what the Dodge Charger and the Dodge Challenger represent in the auto manufacturing world as just pure speed demons, go super fast in a super straight line. And part of that was just a roaring motor, which you don't get with an electric vehicle. But regardless of how you feel about that, this seems like a lock for Matchbox to make. They have done so many EVs, as we've just mentioned. We're talking about 4, 5, 6 every year guaranteed. These cars are coming into production soon. Dodge is a very big partner of Mattel. You see them in the Hot Wheels and Matchbox lineups all the time. It's going to be in the lineup at some point. This year is probably the year as it coincides with the release. Next up, we're talking about, I hope I say this right, the Ineos Grenadier. This was a fantastic pull from my friends of a car they thought they could see Matchbox making. And after reading about it and doing some research, I have to completely agree with them. This is like a stripped down Land Rover, essentially. Essentially, this is a European car that's meant to just be an off-roading SUV, camping, traveling, off-roading, all that. And without all the gimmicks that you see in the other big SUVs that you see over in Europe that are produced by Land Rover and Mercedes-Benz. So instead of having that nice interior and being very posh and very snobby in a lot of regards and costing $130,000 to $250,000, this is stripped down and is made purely for off-roading. It's made purely for outdoor adventures. It starts in like the $70,000, which is still a lot of money, but it's a much more affordable price point for a giant, awesome off-roading SUV like this. So this is made to appeal to the off-roading purist. Matchbox, of course, has a big presence with off-roading. We've seen them do cars like this all the time. They obviously have a working relationship with Land Rover, so we could totally see them do something like this. On top of that, it'd probably be pretty cheap licensing because they're still a relatively new brand, and it's a pretty easy way for them to market themselves to more people. Next up, into something that you might consider a little bit more boring, something I would be incredibly excited to see if they decide to make it. We're going to talk about the Honda Odyssey minivan. We talked about earlier how Matchbox builds everything you could see on the road. Their lineup encompasses everything you could see on the road. Well, what has been a bigger mainstay on the road since the beginning of the 2000s than minivans? SUVs have since taken over that market a little bit, but especially in the mid 2000s and early 2010s, these things were everywhere. My mom owned a Toyota Sienna, and yet somehow, despite their popularity among mainstream consumers and their notability just kind of as like a joke and as a meme, we have never seen Matchbox make a minivan, and that blows my mind. That is such an obvious gap in their lineup they need to fill. I really hope we see one. Nick in particular threw out the Honda Odyssey, so that's the one I threw in there. I'd be more partial to Toyota Sienna. Either way, if we got a minivan, I would be extremely excited and extremely hyped. I think a lot of people would think it's really funny and want to get one. Hot Wheels did like a racing version of the Honda Odyssey like 6 or 7 years ago at this point, and that thing is actually like people really liked it, and it now has like they go for like insane prices on eBay. They're like $1 car. Now you have to buy them for like $20 on eBay, which is like wild to me. There's a spot for minivans in this $1 diecast market, and Matchbox should absolutely go make one, or even better, moving parts minivan with sliding opening doors like they did on the Mercedes camping. I can't remember specifically what it was, but the Mercedes van they did last year. That would be awesome. We need a minivan. I'm team minivan. Let's all get some minivan hype going. I would love to see one. And for our final prediction, we are going to take a look at the Volvo EX90, keeping with that EV trend that we mentioned earlier. Also, as we mentioned earlier in the video, Matchbox's strongest relationships at this current point in time seem to be Subaru and Volvo, just in terms of doing new models. We're always guaranteed 1 or 2 new Volvos every single year. We got that fantastic 240 in 2023, but this one just makes so much sense. They've done some modern stuff. They've done some Volvo classics. We're kind of due for a modern electric version, just because Volvo has invested so heavily in electric cars. We've yet to see an electric Volvo, and like we said earlier, the SUVs are immensely popular in the Matchbox lineup. They do a ton of them. An electric SUV Volvo hits kind of the 3 tiers they've been doing every year. Every year we get a Volvo. Every year we get electric cars. Every year we get SUVs. This one seems incredibly likely. Anyways, that's all for now. If you'll click to my last page, there we go. It clicked to my last page. That's all. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think about the predictions. Which of those predictions would you be excited for if they were to happen? And do you have anything you think we missed? Do you have a car you hope to see Matchbox make or you think they'll make? Let us know in the comments down below. That's all for now. I will be producing plenty of content around the Matchbox Gathering here in late July. I will do a vlog of the Matchbox convention as well as my classic review and all-encompassing video of all the new models that they announced, giving you my thoughts, asking for your thoughts, and just telling you what I think about the general direction of Matchbox for the next year. But that's all. I'll see y'all later. Peace.